I want to start with a thread that's gone through. We have a lot to talk about and a lot to cover. With a thread that has been through this conference so far, which is the, I guess to put it, the competition and the rivalry, and in this case with Apple. You're very quotable. And recently you said, "We think many customers are getting tired of being told what to think by Apple." So if Steve were here, what would you say to him?
Well, the first thing I would say is you finally showed up. It's like, I don't know how you can just sit back and say things where, I mean, our point is real simple on a bunch of things. One, that we believe that you can bring the mobile to the web, that you don't need to go through some kind of control point of an SDK. And that's the core part of our message, that our development environment, you can use your Notepad or creatives, you can use your web authoring tools, and you can use all the normal logic tools that you use, and you can publish those natively to a BlackBerry without writing any native code. So this idea that you can bring a mobile experience to the web is a core aspect of what we're trying to say. You don't need an app for the web. And so this element that somehow it's about how many websites have been repurposed to mobile and that you go through some kind of special development set of tools because there's no other way, we just don't believe that to be true.
So you reject the appification of the web.
Correct. Yeah. There is a role for apps. There's no question. But can you use your existing content assets, and can you use the tools that you normally use to author those web assets to enable them to mobility? That's the core element of that. So you don't need an app for the web, and when you do, so you don't need an app for the web and mobile. And then the other question is, do you need a set of proprietary tools to make those assets, whatever they are, into an asset, or can you use your known tools that you use for creating websites? And it's very, very simple. With our WebWorks, you can create and publish native apps, not writing native code, or you can use an Air SDK and have a local runtime on a BlackBerry. So it's really not about a set of proprietary tools or about appifying the web, as you say. Yeah, we completely disagree with that worldview.
Is the experience, to your mind, as good using BlackBerry devices and WebWorks-enabled or WebWorks-delivered sites as a natively designed app inside of a vertical stack?
Well, I think, we did some early tests and we put them on YouTube yesterday, and so if you see the comparison, running Sun Spider.
This is your iPad Smackdown?
Yeah. It's real simple. You execute some JavaScript and some websites, and it's like 3 to 4 times faster than an iPad because we support multi-core processors. Because
this is on your
Playbook.
Yeah,
right. So it's a multi-core processor.
Do you have the Playbook with you? I'd sure like to see one.
Well, you're going to see one very, very soon. And yes,
Well, maybe Mary Mika will bring one out. Sure.
But it's very important because you can have performance. It's about multi-core processors. It's a POSIX compliant OS. It's EAL4 certified. It runs fast. So this idea that it's go to the YouTube, see it runs fast. Now, go and run Flash content. And the acid test for websites and the fidelity of the Flash renders. So it's self-evident when it's shown.
So given your take on the web doesn't need an app, just needs a device to consume it in the appropriate sort of form factor.
Yeah, it needs a platform that allows you to use your existing web authoring tools, that you can seamlessly use your existing web content.
So one of the great drivers of your business is your Blackberry Exchange, the messaging communications platform that you have, right?
You mean for business Exchange server? Our
Yeah.
server? Yeah, that's the BES server. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's a real
But
good
not
part.
just for business. I mean, my kids have been clamoring for me to get Messenger, right? They just want to.
Yeah, BBM. Well, that's different. That's not the enterprise stuff. The BBM is a messaging framework. Yeah, peer-to-peer, secure. Yeah.
Right. So is that, how is that an app? Is that the web, or what is that?
Well, that's a rare case where we've actually gone a little bit forward in the app space. I mean, we endeavor to do middleware that really enables consumer and enterprise services to be and content to be thoughtfully rendered in a mobile fashion. The reason we did BBM is because it's peer-to-peer. So in a sense, you've done the client, and all you're doing is just using the push protocols to really share peer-to-peer content, within a controlled group. So it's a very small step forward because there's just really not room for somebody else in there. It's a natural extension of a client on a device.
I think one of the reasons that the BlackBerry just swept through, certainly the U.S. market, and that's my experience with it, is how much it sort of got the way people want to work. And it was very much a work phone, and your IT group blessed it.
Yeah.
So, that was cool too.
Yeah.
It got the keyboard thing, and
Yeah.
maybe it was a, middle-aged male, I don't know, but just this seemed to work, right? The whole thumb thing seemed to work.
Middle-aged?
Are you stuck there?
Oh, God, no. Oh, come on. I mean, look at this. The transformation that's happening is amazing. I mean, first of all, look at the consumer adoption all around the world. I mean, the business is growing fantastically. Just on the collaboration side, tremendous adoption of known web properties in mobile like Facebook and Twitter, tremendous growth in things like BBM, peer-to-peer IM. But also, in the enterprise side is growing fantastically. But I think what you're seeing is in mobility, all kinds of different things are moving to this mobile services space, whether it's banking or enterprise or content or web or collaboration. And we're right in the middle of it. And so when you say stuck, I mean, I talk about these web properties. I talk about the Playbook and its performance. You see all the different growth we have around
I guess
the world.
I'm focusing just on the handset for a second. Forgive me, because I've yet to completely fall in love with the next version of handsets, including yours, the way I did initially when the first BlackBerry came out. And recently I saw an HTC a World Phone, Pro, I think it's the Droid Pro, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And it has this BlackBerry, this sort of BlackBerry feel to it with the touchscreen integration in such a way that, what do you make of that?
Well, I haven't seen it and played it, but let's pick a couple things in that. First of all, if you're going to do the enterprise thing, you need a VPN that enterprises are going to bless. We have 250,000 BlackBerry servers. They're with 570 carriers in 180 odd countries around the world. So that matters in terms of interfacing to apps and interfacing to carriers. And so I think that is really great. Now, when you talk about the BlackBerry handhelds, there's a whole bunch of strata of segments around the world, both in price points and functionality and so on, that we serve. And it's important because that is how the industry's architected. When you look at where the market is going, there is no question there's this huge focus on performance and that speed and processors and applications and airlinks. And so whether that's going to be on a tablet, it's going to be on a smartphone, when you carry both, do you lean out the smartphone versus try to catch it in the middle? I think there's a lot of shifts going on. Is it 3G? Is it 4G? So, I think there's a lot of moving parts. I like where we are because we show the performance on the Playbook. I'm not telling you what we're going to use that cavity for a module is for, but stay tuned for that.
Wait a minute.
Well, there's a module cavity in the Playbook. So,
a module cavity.
Well, it's like, what would you put? There's room for a module. So what are you going to do with that? So the question is, do you pair this with a smartphone, or do you stand alone Wi-Fi or wide area? Do you want performance of speed and multi-core processors and a multi-processor OS? And then the question is, are you going to migrate that to the smartphone? And do you want that bigger or smaller with that screen?
Room for all sorts of interesting developments.
There's a tremendous amount of stuff going on. What I'm trying to say is there's a huge amount of shifts going on. And what I like about what we're doing, particularly, is three things. We sell performance, and that's on the web today. You can see that. Number two, we sell web fidelity, web tools that you can offer. And three, we sell CIO professional grade requirements. And that's the market that we're focusing in on.
Aren't some of those CIO professional grade, I mean, this is your long suit, I mean, the enterprise space.
Yeah.
But that responsiveness and comprehension of how work gets done, isn't that something you can export to other stacks? I mean, wouldn't it be cool if you had the Blackberry Exchange running on Android?
Well, we did that for a few years. We did it on like 45 odd different handsets. And what happened was, unless you go deep into the metal, it's kind of a compromised experience, because when you turn on a BlackBerry, you interrogate the boot ROM. So you just don't have susceptibility to the various security compromises. And it's a big threat matrix out there. So it represents a set of promises, and that's why it's so popular in very, very demanding government and healthcare and enterprise environments. What's interesting is when you hear about this consumerization of IT, you still have these enterprise requirements. And so it's a paradox right now that gives a CIO an enormous heartburn. And I think what we're offering with the Playbook and with the Blackberries is the ability to have the mobility, tablets and smartphones, and still have the enterprise gradeness. And so if you've seen all the new extensions for workflow we've done, and the SIP interfaces for unified communications, and as well as the normal collaboration and desktop stuff, very, very powerful, because I think enterprises are really starting to look to do things differently than they used to. And that applies to healthcare and government, and I put that sort of in a big category of enterprises. So I think that sector is going to go through enormous growth. I think the smartphone's going through enormous growth. I think how you consume content is going to be mobile. So, you know, you've seen a lot of stuff on NFC and how you do banking.
I wanted to ask you about NFC and banking.
Super turbulent.
Yeah, and
super turbulent.
So yesterday, Eric showed demonstrated NFC on an unnamed Nexus S. I mean, an unnamed device.
No.
With an unnamed
you put an NFC
gingerbread
chipset in.
OS.
Like, good.
Yeah. So are you going to put an NFC chip in future Blackberries?
Well, I don't comment on future products, but we'd be fools not to have it in the near term.
And who contributed?
And we're not fools.
The theme.
I hope.
That was not a forward-looking statement.
Yeah, we're in quiet period now. Don't get me in trouble. Okay?
You guys are always in quiet period, all you CEOs of public companies.
It's because the alternative is painful.
Jail. Yeah.
That's in the category of painful.
But let me press in on this NFC thing, because I think you have an interesting point of view. Our theme is points of control.
Yeah.
Paying for stuff is a point of control. So where does the accreditation happen?
Well, there you go, isn't it? That's just going to be so darn interesting. And you saw that happen in a lot of, you know, how people procure content and music and stuff like that, that the shift to control happens. And John, I think you're bang on an important question. It's like, who puts in the credentials? I mean, the banks like to be in the credentials business. They're very good at it. They have a history on it. And that matters, like, that's everything to a bank. They give you your credit card and your debit card and all that stuff. So will they be issuing the credentials? Or, you know, some carriers may say, well, we'll put in the credentials because we give you credentials on the SIM for accessing my network. Credentials are credentials. Or a platform company may say, well, actually, you know, I've got your credentials. You know, I mean, I do e-commerce with you. I'll put in the credentials. And so you're right. I would say, you know, the whole idea of hijacking, you know, apps with a proprietary SDK, I think that's about to shift back to normalcy. I think that whole game had a short window that's shifting.
In other words, just to unpack that for a second, your view is that in the history of the web, and to use that in a Catholic sense, with small c, you know, that we had this open platform that got hijacked, appified, hijacked, and that's we're sort of getting through a bad part of our history, and we're going to get back to...
No question. Why wouldn't you use your existing tools and your existing assets if you could?
It's somewhere backstage, Shantanu is smiling.
Because he's right. Because I mean, it doesn't have to be Adobe tools, but we happen to have a very good implementation. You've got, 3 million Creative Suite, developers. You've got hundreds of millions of install base. All the content guys like it. But it could be also, Notepad or Eclipse or Visual Studio or any one of your Dreamweaver, any one of the stuff you use to create stuff. It doesn't have to be one company particular. So I think I think that era is going to pass real quick, kind of like proprietary DRM for music. It just passes. But I think a bigger question when you talk about, or another big question is, who's going to be responsible for credentials? I think you are going to money, and this is going to be an ATM.
Do you have a long bet on that one?
Oh, gosh. Honestly, I think the smart person constructively aligns with the banks. We constructively align with content. Insert your own ad APIs. Like, we'll have open ad APIs. Insert your own ads. Like, you don't have to fire your sales force for a content player. With the carriers, we try to constructively align with them. You can put your purchases on a carrier bill. The carriers can modify the front end. We sell through the carrier.
When you say the carriers modify the front end, unpack that one.
Well, I mean, they can add their own services. They all kinds of services that we have the concierge where they can customize their front end
But aren't all those the apps you hide?
Aren't those the apps?
Well, I mean,
I think they're APIs. They're APIs. It's like
no, but I'm talking about like when you get your phone and then there's all this stuff from the carriers and you're like.
But I think I mean, there's elements of that, but even.
I feel like you're being steered a bit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you look at this, some of them do music services and navigation services. I mean, you're steered, but you're steered whether it's by a web platform company or by a carrier resold that, or whether it's an application company's store or whether it's a carrier store. The point is you support them in doing that, and you sell through their channels, and you integrate it into the carrier bill. So it's a legitimate thing for the carrier to do, to have a provisioning, carrying, selling, merchandising, billing relationship.
Right.
And what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to money, the bankers have a credentials game. And be careful if you're going to take that on, just as much as if you're going to disintermediate content for the ad insertion. It becomes, maybe if it's a one-time publishing thing by a song, it'll work. But when it's dynamic publishing every day, like news or newspapers or magazines, they're going to be able to adapt their ways in tomorrow's edition. So I like the constructive alignment approach. I like web tools. I like carrier alignment, like content alignment. I think the wise person tries to find a way to align with banks on NFC and payments prosperously, but not contentiously. But there's more than one way to approach these things.
Right.
And you asked me what I think. There were people that would beg to differ, and I'm sure people will implement different strategies.
Right. Please come up to the microphones with questions for Jim.
We have 10 more minutes, right?
Yes.
Great.
At least that much if you guys have that many questions for Jim. I want to ask about the Playbook. Again, it still hasn't come out through the curtains. I have a few minutes hoping
we
it
mess
will.
up launch events.
I know
and
there's
all that
one
kind of
back
stuff.
there.
Yeah, it works really good. Check the website.
It was generally well received. As people are excited by the product.
Yeah.
I know you are as well. What defines success for you with this product? What a year from now, how many units or what?
Yeah.
How are you going to judge whether this is
we have internal unit plans for sure. The receptivity from enterprise. This is a professional product for people who want to combine professional and personal life. So this whole element of, making your CIO happy and being able to have web properties, web content, and high performance, two-way facing cameras, etc., is key. So there's definitely a volume element for us. Based on our enterprise meetings, we have a lot of corporates we deal with. We feel pretty good about the pent-up demand. It's just getting the product out. And, when it performs like it does, we like that. And the speed, when it gives you the web fidelity, flash and non-flash, we like that.
But if I'm not running a corporate environment, a Blackberry Exchange environment, am I not going to be able to use this? Or?
No, of course you will. It's got the cameras, it's got the it's a full web unit, right?
So how much do you expect it to split between that use, which is sort of the iPad use, case, and your sort of long suit and enterprise?
Well, I think it's a bit indeterminate, and I sort of don't worry about it. Whether there's a wide area radio in it or not, it runs Wi-Fi, whether it runs paired with your BlackBerry smartphone, or it runs master its own, and then you go at web properties. I don't overthink it because I don't know and I don't have to know. You just enable performance, CI requirement, web compatibility, and away you go, because how people compute is shifting. The feature phone's upgrading to a smartphone, how you consume content and compute in enterprise and non-enterprise shifting to mobile. So you're moving into a sweet spot with a high-performance platform. Yeah, you want to move a certain number of units for sure. You want to cross over sectors, but you've got a long suit you play into, and if you move enough units, you've advanced the organization and advanced the industry. So I don't really overthink it. We've got a certain amount of stuff we got to move because you commit to components and you got a business plan and all that. But
what's the time frame again? I'm sorry if I'm asking.
Q1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and there's other things we're going to be showing. Like we've got a successive. I mean, we showed the whole Air flash stuff, with Chantenu a couple weeks ago, and maybe a couple other things showing up in the next 30 days. And it's. But again, I like, you see the performance on YouTube. I mean, first out of the gate, 3 to 4 times faster. That's very, very good. It shows,
So that's a video that folks can look out on YouTube.
Multi-core, multi-processor. I mean, It's baked into an EAL4 OS that runs 32-core processors from day. It's designed for that. Then you have a bunch of WebWorks tools and support for Adobe tools that shows it's about a web fidelity tool and asset strategy. That's markedly different.
The enterprise space is...
Than the enterprise.
Markedly different.
That's different again, you're right.
And so, and people would love to use your platform as a way to deliver services into, sort of as a doorway in, right?
Yeah.
Do you see that as a platform that in other words, maybe I'm talking about apps and that's bad, but I think once
there's tons of enterprise apps.
Yeah, but once you get into the enterprise space, you really kind of have to be credentialed in a way, right?
Yeah, but that's the. I mean, you are authenticated in a BlackBerry, so it's a designed authentication strategy outbound through the infrastructure. So the authentication is blessed and proven. But what gets interesting, and the enterprise is a little different because you author your apps using the vendor's tools. So, for instance, at our DevCon, we showed using, Oracle JBuilder and Fusion middleware. You can publish using your existing, development stuff to a BlackBerry, and we've extended the push libraries to that and the single sign-on. Well, what does that mean? It means it's a familiar environment. There's no proprietary SDK you go through, number one. And number two, now that you have push, you've changed the velocity of workflow, which is fundamentally what people kind of want to do. That's what happened in email. Then we also showed that because of Flash, most of the BI stuff for, say, SAP with the business objects runs in Flash. Well, now that you can on a tablet run, because BI is very UI-centric.
I'm assuming that's business intelligence.
Business intelligence, yeah.
I'm glad I got that right.
But that's huge, right? The fact that you can run the main business intelligence stuff on a tablet now. What happens now when you do push into business intelligence?
Isn't this exactly what HP is trying to do as well? And do you consider them a significant competitor with the acquisition of WebOS?
Well, I mean, they have to come up with a tablet strategy. But the nature of this kind of stuff is, if their strategy is the same as ours, I agree with them. Then it comes into implementation.
Yeah. We've got a question over here.
Jim, a quick question from David Levin at UBM. Is it over for Nokia?
Just speak up a little bit, please.
Yeah, sorry, we have an echo.
Is it over for Nokia?
Is it over for Nokia?
Well, I'm not going to comment on another company. I think what you...
Oh, please do.
Well, all right, then, go ahead, as long as you don't tell anybody. Shut off your mics.
No, we won't tell anybody, right?
I think what you're seeing, and again, this is a core thesis, is that the feature phone and the cell phone has shifted to a smartphone and a smartphone platform. And so what is your services platform in mobility matters. And as well, other forms of computing and laptops are also shifting to mobility and tablets. So the core aspect of that question is, how well is a company able to adapt and implement to that? And you know, their new CEO is a really good guy, and he's experienced in this with Macromedia and Microsoft, and you wish Steve Ellop well. But these are big shifts when they're not part of your lineage.
Yeah.
And I think the companies have done well. I think they've architected and built it from the ground up and caught a shift when it happens. These shifts are hard to change. You know, the old expression, it's hard to change the tires on a car going 100 miles an hour down the road. And that's not to say these aren't good companies who do good things. It's just, it's hard to do.
Yeah, this disruption has truly, you know, left some people without jobs. We had OPK, the CEO of Nokia, on the docket here. Then he got fired, and we spoke to Stephen, and he said, just give me a couple more months before I sit here and tell you what we're
And I could be wrong on the banks. What if web platforms issue credentials for banking?
Yeah.
My God, like you're talking big job shift.
So we have another question here.
It's similar to what I asked the Adobe CEO earlier, and it kind of follows on what you just mentioned, which is I'm wondering about your lineage. What is the heart of RIM? What do you stand for as the market evolves, as things evolve? Like, what do you keep going back to that is your kind of foundation for moving forward?
Okay. There's two aspects of RIM that I think are our foundation. One is innovative performance, and the second is constructive alignment. So, and when I talk about constructive alignment, I think they nest together very well. When you talk about the performance of the enterprise VPN, the performance of the OS and the multi-coreness of it, and also the performance of the implementation of the tools, the existing tools, I put those into a performance card that it performs fast, it performs secure, it performs push, it matters. The second part is, as all these things converge, do you want to over-the-top them, or do you want to constructively align with them? And we have chosen a constructive alignment strategy with the carrier, with content, with tools, with CO imperatives, and we're quite frankly likely going to do the same thing when it comes to credentials and payments.
And when you say, do you want to over-the-top them, you mean?
Well, I mean, an over-the-top strategy is saying, okay, that happens, basically where you say the carrier's a bit pipe, thank you very much, get out of the way, we'll do everything for you. And again, that's not a value statement. I'm not saying something's good or bad, or somebody's a good person or a bad person. These are strategic calls, and they're strategically different, and they have lots of ramifications in how you architect your products and your business technically and operationally. So our two things are innovation and performance, performance-based, born from innovation, and constructive alignment. And so when I talk about these tool strategies, I think you get a lot more leveraging the existing web properties and tools than you say, hey, you got to go through this new door. I do. And so I think it's a good strategy. And I think we're showing we can do a good job of implementing performance harmoniously with the alignment. But there's elements of nuancing that comes at play. You just can't say, this is the way it is, and get over it. So you have to, and when it gets weird, as an example, is when banks and carriers both want strong roles, and coordination is the best strategy for both. The nuancing gets tricky. Mm-hmm. It can get tricky. Or when an app company tries to do stack leverage in the enterprise, but it's better to be an abstracted VPN for multiple apps. It gets tricky. You see that, right? Companies try to do email and OSs and lever it all together, and really enterprises say, well, I want to do a whole bunch of things, and and I want to do it in a bunch of carriers in a bunch of countries, so are you a DMZ for this, or are you a fully integrated play? It gets tricky. It does, every day.
Got another question here.
So earlier you mentioned that it's critical to get deep into the metal to leverage the full capability of the device. Now, how do you do that without going through the app world? How do you leverage all the capabilities that a device has without creating something specific for the device?
So how do you create something that leverages to the metal if you're talking about leveraging the tools of the web and what's already been done on
Well,
the
that's
web.
a good question, and I guess what I would say to that is, number one, we've engineered, first of all, in some respects, the Adobe stuff from the metal up, so that's the quality of implementation on that. The truth of it is the QNX SDK has a whole bunch of native development tools that you can go into those, but you don't have to. And quite frankly, those that are working with it, the gaming companies, say this has more power than a gaming console because you can use, web assets where you want, usually on the UI, but you can go right to the metal on performance and you can mix those. So it's not an imperative to hijack, but you bring down a very, very good point that sometimes going low gives you performance. And that option's available. It's just not a precondition. So it's an option if you can get, and some things like gaming performance really, really matters. Other things, a bit of a compromise in performance doesn't matter if you get the leverage and the richness of the UI and the cross-environment support. And that's a developer's prerogative.
I'm going to get one more question here, and then I'm afraid I'll have to cut it off because we're running over.
Two more.
Okay, if they're fast.
Hey there, Jim. You spoke to the need for Nokia to adapt to the changing market and build some good smartphones.
I wasn't talking particular to
Not
Nokia.
particularly about
I didn't
Nokia.
say anything about them
Fair
that
enough.
way.
Changing market conditions, people are moving from feature phones to smartphones and so on.
That's a market shift. Yes, I agree.
Excellent. Excellent. I wanted to ask, we've heard about your tablet plans and we're very excited about those. When are we going to see an envelope-pushing smartphone from RIM and Blackberry?
Well, I think there's a very fair question. First of all, you can run the Java apps on the Playbook, so that's very important. And the 7-inch stuff is really sweet because it's about a pound, and it just does a lot of sweet spot aspects for the market. The question that you're asking is, when are you going to shrink the packaging so you can hold it up to your ear? Yeah, and we don't talk about future products.
But it's not a bad idea.
It's not the hardest thing in the world to do. So, if you can run all your Java apps and you can get all this richness of multi-core and maybe quad-core, et cetera, and you can align with the ecosystem and you can make it bigger or smaller, it just gets so interesting because, you're leveraging and enabling what's going on. And it's a platform enabling thing. That's why I think the constructive. So basically you're saying, can you bring that platform in something that can hold up to my ear?
More, it's how soon can you bring the platform
Well, I
down
mean,
to
once
that
you
size?
do it this big, how hard is it to do it that big? And we can't talk about future products, but you're on an interesting stream. And then if that's something that fits into that market, tablets into your ear, and you've played a constructive alignment richness play, I think you've done a slingshot of this market into something really, really interesting. And that's why we're particularly bullish these days. I can't talk about future products, but, it's not the hardest thing in the world to repackage these things. Let's get it done.
No, you can't get another one. One last one behind you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for taking the one last one.
Yeah.
Just to clarify earlier what you said about the app-centric model that we're going through now with the application-happy planet that we're on right now. You made some comments earlier. I wanted to clarify. I'm Glenn Chapman, AFP. Are you saying that the application-centric model of Apple is a passing fad?
No, what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to make the web an app just to get, I don't need a YouTube app to go to YouTube. So the web shouldn't be an app, is point number one. Point number two, there's an enormous role for apps in mobility. The question is, can I use my existing web properties and web tools to run those without a stitch of native code on the device? And so, in a sense, it's an open app environment and not a proprietary one and not a forced one. But absolutely, there's a huge role for apps. And I also would say is, once you do this, what does it do to the mobile content game? And I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of mobile content coming in this game, and they're going to need to monetize that, and quite frankly, they're going to need to monetize ad insertion. And so, but they still create using pretty known web tools. So honestly, I think you're seeing some very interesting shifts at play, not even talking NFC and banking.
Right. talking ads as well, but we didn't get a chance to, and unfortunately, we have
talked
to
all
wrap
day.
up. Join me in thanking Jim for a
thanks,
very
John.
candid conversation.
Yeah,
Jim,
it was a
thank
real
you very
pleasure.
much.
Yeah.
That was great.
Thank you very much, guys. What a good show.